Welcome to the Write Better Fiction podcast, the show that helps you, well, write better fiction. I'm Shane Miller, urban fantasy author, writing coach, and story geek, and each week I'll be talking to industry experts about the writing craft, publishing, and the business of being an author. Enjoy the show. Hello, fictioneers, and welcome to episode 2 of the Write Better Fiction podcast. Today, I'm super excited because I am chatting to the living legend that is Angela Ackerman, one of the co-authors of the Emotion Thesaurus. And no surprises, we're talking all about how to create realistic emotion. So you're going to pick up a ton of actionable tips for that. So I hope you stay tuned. But first, it's time for Question of the Week. Last week's question was, what was your favorite thing about writing characters? Sherry Leclerc said, one of my favorite things about creating dialogue is thinking about how things from the character's past, their wound, their ghost, the lie they're living, etc., affects how they act and react in the present. For example, what triggers them and how do they act when they're triggered? And this is a great answer because I often think about my character's past as I'm designing them, for want of a better word. And it's hard for authors not to include all that backstory on the page, but you do need to know some of it before you start writing, because then you'll be able to filter everything your protagonist experiences through that protagonist lens, and that's just one of the best things. And then Mary Van Everbrook said, bringing their uniqueness and specialness to life on the page. And again, this is another great answer. I talk a lot in most of my craft books about how to build a character's uniqueness. And I think it's one of the really great things we can do to help differentiate one character from another. Right, this week's question is, do you prefer writing positive or negative emotions and why? Okay, it's time for my update from the writing chair. In case you missed it, I had the absolute honor of being on the Indie Author podcast, and I had a great chat with the incredible Matty Dalrymple all about how to be a writer if you hate writing. So I've left a link in the show notes for that. In other news, I'm getting ready to go to 20 books to 50k this week in Seville. If you are going as well, DM me on Instagram or TikTok and let me know. It'd be cool to catch up in person. And this is actually the first author event that I'm going to in person, because I started writing in the height of the pandemic, so we were all in lockdown, and I haven't really had chance to get stuck into anything in person yet, so I'm really excited about that. And one of my major goals this year is to meet more writers in person, so I've got a lot of writing events coming up that I'm really excited about. And lastly, I'm hosting the Write Better Fiction Challenge over on Instagram and TikTok, where I give writers a prompt every day, and we just geek out about stuff related to writing, their stories. It's a lot of fun and great way to meet new writers that you don't know yet, so come and get involved with that. If you want early access to episodes and exclusive access to the Fictioneer community on Discord, where you get to take part in things like Question of the Week and weekly accountability, you can support the Write Better Fiction podcast for $5 a month. Support the show at patreon.com/writebetterfiction. When I reach 50 patrons, I'm going to start recording a monthly Q&A session that will go out to patrons exclusively. Okay, that's enough waffling on from me. Let's get into the interview with Angela. Hello and welcome to the Write Better Fiction podcast. Today, I'm joined by Angela Ackerman. Angela is the author of 10 best-selling resource books printed in 10 different languages, and she enjoys sharing her passion for the writing craft. She's a writing coach, international speaker, and a firm believer that writers succeed best together. The desire to help writers in new, innovative ways led to One Stop for Writers, a unique site originally co-founded with Becca Puglisi and Lee Powell, who is the creator of Scrivener for Windows and Linux. One Stop for Writers contains game-changing tools and resources that enable writers to craft powerful fiction. Hi, Angela. Welcome to the show.
Hi, and thank you.
You're so welcome. Well, I'm going to launch right into this. So if you could start by telling us a bit about you and your journey to where you are today.
Well, it's quite a long journey. It starts way back when baby Angela was a nice green writer, and I met Becca Puglisi on a critique site online called the Critique Circle. and we were exchanging manuscripts and critiquing each other's work, and we just really, we really gelled. But we also found that we had a lot of common struggles, and one of those was emotion. We really struggled with how to show it, and we felt like our characters were always expressing things the same way, and it was really boring, and we couldn't go deep enough. And so we decided to start creating lists of all the different ways a character would express emotion through, physical movement and the different thoughts that they would have and things like that. And then we decided to start a blog together, and we started posting entries of different emotions on the site, and people kind of went crazy for it. Like, we didn't realize that how many other writers struggled with the same thing we did. And so having this list of all these different ways you can express a particular emotion, like fear or happiness or whatever, it just became this really great tool for people, so that when they got stuck, they could look at the list, find something, and then they could keep writing because it would inspire that idea. So that kind of started our journey to, we explored emotions, setting, personality traits, emotional wounds, conflict, you name it. Some of them became books, others didn't, but they've all come together in the Thesaurus database. That's a one-stop for writers. So I think there's 16 thesauruses there now, and there's 2 more to come. One will be added in March on fears, so I'm really excited about that. We're just putting the finishing touches on it now. So
awesome.
Yeah, and so books, and then software, and just like, we're always thinking about how can we help writers. Like, we feel like we know what we would need, and we've looked, for different tools and things like that to help us keep in the writing flow, inspire us with ideas, and demystify some of the really hard aspects of writing, like character building and plotting, and these things that are these huge pieces that have 800 million parts to it. And so, we just thought to ourselves, there's got to be a way that we can use our thesaurus content and really help writers put all these pieces together. And that's kind of why One Stop for Writers came to be, is so that we could do that.
Yeah, and it is a fantastic resource for anyone who hasn't tried out One Stop. I mean, I'm just blown away by the database. It's absolutely fantastic. And obviously, what we're here to talk about today is the writing thesaurus of yours that I can't do without, and I use it for every single book I write, which is the Emotion Thesaurus. So thank you for that, first of all. And one of the concepts that you talk about in the thesaurus, and a lot of the thesaurus is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So can you explain what that hierarchy is and why it's so important for writing fiction?
Well, one thing that Beck and I talk about constantly, and is a concept that we build into everything we do, is to really make sure that our characters think, act, and behave like real people. And so that means thinking about human psychology and thinking about what causes us to do the things that we do, and why do we make the decisions we make, and what scares us, and all that stuff. Because the more we can kind of understand how our gray matter works, we can put that into our characters. We can put the real world into our storytelling, and then that really helps writers or readers just feel like they're right there, and they're experiencing those moments with the characters, and they're right there in the scene. And at the heart of all of that is psychology, and at the heart of that is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Now, Maslow, if you probably have heard it, if you don't know what it is outright, so I'll just like a really fast review. It's a theory of basic human needs that cause all people to act. Basically, there's 5 different types of human needs that are really important to all people to feel fulfilled, happy, complete. And if a need is missing and it becomes a critical need, meaning, it's kind of like a hole inside us, that there's something missing, and we just sometimes we can't figure out what it is. Other times we know exactly what it is, like a relationship. We're lonely, we want to meet somebody, we know that we want a partner in life, and there's this hole. We can identify what it is, and only when we fill it will we feel complete. And Maslow's hierarchy looks at the 5 different basic needs, which is physiological needs, basically survival needs. So food, water, shelter, reproductive sex, things like that. safety and security, which is the need to be safe and secure, to be healthy, both for ourselves and the people in our lives. So for the character and the people that they care about when you think about storytelling. Love and belonging, which is all about the need to love others, to be loved in turn, to have a family, to feel like you belong. It's like a very strong social need. Esteem and recognition, which is all about the need to feel our own self-worth and feel like other people recognize our value as well. And then self-actualization, which is higher goals that we have, education, our morality, our living our truth, things like that are iconic to who we are. And so all of these needs are things that we can translate into our storytelling and identify exactly what is missing from the character's life at the start of the story, because that's what we need to figure out, that internal motivation, because our characters have a goal and there has to be a reason why they want that particular goal. What does that goal represent? And that goal represents that missing need. So if we were writing a romance, that missing need would be love and belonging, right? They may think at the start of the story that they don't need a relationship, that they're complicated, that men are awful or women are awful or whatever it is, but deep down, there's something missing from their life. And until they can fill that hole, they're always going to feel like something is missing. And so in a romance, it's that process of discovering what it is that they really need, and then finding somebody that feels like is going to, be that perfect partner for them, and, the evolution of that romance. And so Maslow's hierarchy of human needs is just really powerful for storytellers because we can figure out what our character's motivation is. We can use it to figure out what our character's soft spots are. If we know that our character is, maybe he's in a loveless marriage and his wife is someone that really grinds him down and grinds down his self-esteem and always is pointing out his flaws and his faults and stuff like that, then he's probably going to be really sensitive to those type of things, really sensitive to criticism or somebody pointing out their failures at work or something like that. And so you can kind of poke those soft spots a little bit, because we're evil, that's just how
true.
we are. So yeah, conflict, you can figure out sources of conflict by understanding your character's missing needs. They may even have a job that is a goal that it's going to fulfill a piece of them. If it's someone who loves to give back, maybe they're an animal rescue worker or something like that, right? Or a social worker, or so there's so many different ways that you can think about these basic human needs and how they really steer our decisions in life and how they're also going to steer our characters. So that's a really fast overview, but it's like a magic tool for writers.
Yeah, it really is. And I was quite fascinated that it had so much application to writing, because I hadn't read anything about Maslow since college. So
yeah,
revisiting it again and kind of applying it to my writing, it really does help. Like you said, we are evil and we poke the soft spots of our protagonists, and this is a brilliant way to kind of get to the root of what those are. So yeah, definitely invaluable. Yeah, it's fantastic. So what are the most common problems then that you see writers make when it comes to expressing emotion in their fiction?
I would say probably weaker or overused description, or even showing and then telling, because and I know this is a problem that I really struggled with at the start too. It's like, I think I'm showing it well enough, but I'm not sure. So I'm just going to slide a little bit of telling in there too, just to make sure I'm hammering home the point that readers get that my character is afraid or sad or whatever's going on. I would say those are probably the two top ones. So weaker description or overused description is where maybe a writer would use kind of gestures and cues that you just see a lot. Or visceral sensations, things that are tied to particular emotions. You might even think of these as cliches. The rushing heartbeat, the beat the heartbeat in the chest, or breath rushing in and out, or clenched fists, things like that. There's nothing wrong with any of those, and we can absolutely use all of those in our storytelling, but we always have to make sure that we're writing it fresh. We want to be able to describe it in a way that fits our character, fits the situation, and that we understand enough about our character to really tailor their responses to who they are, different aspects of their personality and things like that. So I would definitely say that the first ideas that often come to mind when we're going to describe emotions, those are okay for the first draft. And then the second draft, that's where we want to challenge ourselves to go a little bit deeper, to think more, a little bit fresher. How can we rephrase this? Or is this the best way to show this emotion? Are we telling when we should be showing? Are we using telling words like naming the emotion? That's something that I used to do when I would, follow it up with a little bit of telling, like, she sighed, with sadness or something like that. You just like, if you're doing your job and you're showing really well, you shouldn't need to name the emotion. And there are certain circumstances where maybe you may want to name an emotion, but they're few and far between. So we really want to challenge ourselves to show it on the page and make the readers feel like they can, they're seeing the stimulus of what's causing that emotion. You're really like focused on what's causing them anxiety or whatever they're feeling, so that they connect the dots. Oh, okay, they're anxious. They're not just like cold or something like that. So it's kind of important to focus on what's causing them to feel a certain way, so that readers can easily connect dots.
Yeah, you made a good point there, because a lot of physical reactions can mean a lot of different things. So if we just like tell the physical reaction or show the physical reaction, it might not be enough. We kind of need to go deeper, I guess.
Well, I think that's why people will say, she shivered in fear, versus like she shivered because she had a t-shirt on and she had a sweater, like but it's not necessary. But that said, it's totally okay to do that as placeholders. And I do this too. And I think everybody does this. You're writing, you're in the flow. Like, don't, stop and then, paralyze yourself and pull yourself out of the scene because you're trying to figure out the exact perfect way to describe something. That's what revision is for. When you're drafting, like, don't worry about having telling words, or, if your emotion is not, on par, it's okay. Like, it can all be finessed later.
Great, that's perfect. So now that we've covered some of the issues, how would you recommend that writers use the Emotion Thesaurus either on its own or in conjunction with other thesauri when they're either planning or revising, or however they choose to use it?
Well, the Emotion Thesaurus, the strength of it is when we get stuck. Like, okay, we've got this intense scene and our character is running through the woods and there's like an axe murderer behind them. Awesome. How are we going to show that? That's where sometimes we can get paralyzed, and we feel like there's so much pressure on us to get this scene exactly right. And even in revisions, we're very aware that we need to capture the reader's attention. We need to hold their attention. We need to make them feel like they're riding around in a character's head, that they're really experiencing that moment themselves. And so there is a lot of pressure on us to do this exactly right. And sometimes we struggle. Maybe we can't think of something that's really fresh, or, our mind keeps circling like the same sort of ideas. And so you can pull up the emotion that you're dealing with in your story, and you can just run through the list of different ways that a character would express that emotion physically, through different things that they might do with their body language or actions. You can look up dialogue cues and thoughts and visceral sensations, which are like the internal things that happen inside the body that we can't control, and our characters won't be able to control either. And you can kind of just read through these lists and think about your character and think about who they are. And what we hear over and over and over from people is that they do that, and then bang, it's like a light bulb goes off. They'll read something and they're like, oh my God, that's it. That's what they're doing, or that's what they're going to say. And then, like, you don't just take that thing and then plunk it into your story. You have to think about how am I going to show that in a way that's, fresh. But that's usually how people use these lists. I think the list can also be really helpful when we're thinking about our characters hiding their emotions, which happens a lot because emotions as people tend to make us feel vulnerable, exposed. We worry about being judged. We worry about people thinking that we're weak. And I think that it's very natural for our characters to have some of these same thoughts. In the story, there's usually something at stake. Or maybe our characters are worried that, someone's going to, judge them or use that information or emotion against them. And so often they will try to hide their emotions from other characters, but the readers always need to know what our characters are feeling. And so that's the big one, is that it doesn't matter how much they're trying to hide what they feel physically from other people, we still need to be able to get that emotion across to readers. And so it can be really helpful for giving us ideas on what that hidden emotion might look like.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love so much about not just the Emotion Thesaurus, but all of them, in that you can go really deep because you give examples from internal thought to body language to those you mentioned, like involuntary reactions that characters have. So it gives us a lot of ways that we can avoid those kind of cliche she shivered type emotions. So yeah, absolutely fantastic again, and highly recommend. Another concept that you speak about at the start of the Emotion Thesaurus are the vehicles for showing emotion, and this bit kind of blew my mind. So can you give the listeners an overview of what these vehicles are and how we can express emotion using them, being that you've just spoken about kind of the difference between showing and telling emotion?
Yeah. So I think the other part where writers kind of struggle is they do get sort of tied up in body language, that they have to show emotion through body language. But there's actually so many different ways to express emotion. The first is body language in action, in gestures. There's certain things that you think about us. You think about things that when you're experiencing a certain emotion, if you're anxious, you've got a lot of tension in your body, right? You may pace a lot and things like that. And so we can think about things that our characters might be doing physically when they're experiencing a certain type of emotion, how they're holding themselves, what their body posture is like, how much room are they taking up, things like that. But there's other ways to show emotion too. For example, one great way to show emotion is in dialogue scenes, thinking about different vocal cues. Because the reality is that in conversations, people rarely speak their mind about how they feel, because they're usually concerned about either holding back information, being careful about what they say, not revealing too much, or they're trying to keep the peace in some way. They don't want the other person that they're speaking to get upset or things like that. And so when emotions get closer and closer to the surface, it's harder to keep them out of your voice. And so we can show this in storytelling with our characters, different things that they might do when those emotions are getting close to the surface, or when they're really struggling to not say something or not give something away. If a character is pressing them for information and they're trying to, redirect or something like that, they might change the topic really quickly. They might ask a question of somebody else or the other character to sort of like distract them. So there's lots of different techniques that we can use in dialogue, and then those dialogue cues of changes in the voice, interruptions, and the voice going higher or lower or more gravelly. There's such a huge amount of things that we can do with our character's voice and dialogue exchanges, which is really great. Visceral sensations I talked a little bit about before. Visceral sensations are the internal things that happen inside a person's body when they experience an emotion. And they are completely uncontrollable. They just happen. And the best part about them is that they're common with all people. All people experience visceral reactions, and very often the very same ones that the character has experienced. So it's a great way to remind readers of a time where they felt that exact same emotion. They'll recognize it. The downside with visceral sensations is that they are very common and they are limited. And so it's very easy for us to overuse them. And so we can become a little bit melodramatic, if everybody's breath is rushing in and out and their heartbeat is thumping like crazy, and too many of those piled on together, and you can get like a very melodramatic situation, or all the characters sort of sound the same when you're describing their emotions. So the best thing with viscerals is like a hit of them when you have a really strong emotion. When you just need to give it a little extra punch, that's when you should use those. Thoughts are another thing that we can use. Thoughts are great for context. We show don't tell applies to everything, including our characters' thoughts. And of course, we have to be in their point of view to show their thoughts when it comes to emotion. But we don't often think about it. But when we're in the throes of a particular emotion, our brain is kind of working in a very specific way. So if we think about, if we're really anxious or upset or worried about something, our brains tend to think about the bad things that are going to happen, and, like the unknowns. We think about the unknowns, and then our brain goes to like the worst case scenario. And so these are ways where we can show and not tell what our character is feeling based on the type of thoughts that they have. They're not going to think, oh, I'm so anxious or I'm so worried. They're going to be obsessing about the thing that's making them anxious or worried, right? So that's kind of what we want to do with our thoughts. Okay, what is that? That's viscerals, physical. I gotta think which ones I'm missing. Dialogue cues. Did I get them all?
I think you might have done.
I might have got them all. Hopefully I'm not missing any.
Yeah, I think that is all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so there we go.
Well done. Good memory.
Yeah, you know what? Emotion is fun. There's so many ways to show it. And so that's really the message here, is don't get caught up in just the physicality of it. You want to have your characters do, a variety of different things at different times. And that's how we make our writing fresh, is that we're not just always showing our characters clenched fists. We're really weaving in different vehicles, different ways to show what our characters are feeling.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. And using those kind of vehicles for showing emotion will really help you to diversify the types of reactions you're showing. So perfect again. Yeah. So what do readers need to know about their characters to be able to write authentic emotion, like authentic to that character?
I can't underscore this enough. The better you understand who your character is, the easier it will be able to write their actions, behavior, emotion, all of that stuff. Because so much of it comes down to who your character is, and they are going to express themselves very differently. They're going to act different in different situations. They're going to have different triggers. So their emotions are going to be activated in different circumstances and stuff like that. So the more you understand about your character, the better. So I would say start with personality. Definitely have a good feel of who your character is and the different type of personality traits they have. Some people have very robust personality traits. They're very confident or intrepid, or even they have pride and things like that. Like they're strong personality types that might probably are going to skew to more demonstrative actions and stuff like that. They're going to take up more room. They're going to be more vocal. They're going to gesture more and things like that. And then there's other personality traits that your character is probably going to be a little bit more reserved. If they are private, for example. Not everybody likes to share everything, and they like to keep stuff close to the vest. If your character's like that, then think about how that's going to impact what they're going to do and how they're going to express their emotions when they're around other people, when they're around people like family members, or when they're by themselves. Like that's the other thing, is who's around your character at this time. And do they feel safe to express emotions? Are they worried about someone judging them or using their emotions against them? Or are they alone? If they're alone, then, there's no reason for them to hold back. There's no reason for them to just not allow themselves to feel, unless they're trying to, put a shield in place to kind of protect them from being emotionally hurt. So think about where your character is, if they feel safe to express emotions or if they're going to hide those emotions or not. Also understand a little bit about your character's emotional range. So an emotional range is thinking about your character's typical expressiveness. Like I said, everybody's kind of on a range depending on their personality traits, different things that may bother them. If you and I are both scared, but scared of different things, for example, like maybe I'm scared of spiders and a spider like wanders across my desk, I'm going to be freaking out. I'm going to be pushing back, my chair against the wall. I'm going to be running from the room, whatever. But you might be like, yeah, whatever, it's a spider, Angela, and just sort of like take a piece of paper and help it off the desk. It's not even going to bother you, but it's going to bother me. So kind of understanding what's a typical response for your character in different types of situations and what emotions they might be sensitive to. When you're thinking about emotional sensitivities, that's where it's really good to understand what your character's emotional wounds are, their past baggage. If they've had, let's say you have a character that had a lot of family drama growing up, a lot of maybe mom and dad pit the kids against each other and there was a lot of competition and stuff like that, your character could become very sensitive to any sort of family events because they feel like they're on edge. They're waiting for someone to say something or do something to cause, to make them feel bad or something like that. And so your character is immediately going to have their emotions kind of activated in those type of scenes. So definitely thinking about those emotional triggers, because again, we're evil and we want to poke those sensitive spots. When it pushes the story forward, we're not looking to just cause drama in our story. Like it's always with a purpose, especially when it comes to emotional wounds and sensitivities. I mean, those are things that our character probably needs to work on a little bit. They are probably holding them back in some way in the story. And so they need to kind of break free from those things if they're on kind of a change arc in the story. So we want to be thinking about that. I think another thing that you could think about too is if your character has a tendency towards fight, flight, or freeze. This also kind of goes into who we are, and we all, in certain circumstances, sometimes it's because you're an extrovert versus an introvert, but it can be other things too. When something happens, do we have a tendency to get mad and upset and like tackle it head on? Or do we tend to pull back and just, I don't want to deal with this, I'm going to leave now? Or do we freeze and just get really quiet? And so we can ask those questions about our character. If something happens in a dialogue exchange where your character is having, a great conversation and everything's great, and then all of a sudden someone says something that is kind of like this underhanded thing that they've done to your character, are they gonna get really mad and they're just gonna start taking that person to task, or maybe using sarcasm or something like that? Or are they gonna get passive aggressive? Like, what are they gonna do? So understanding that fight, flight, freeze can also help us sort of figure out what our character's responses are going to be. So yeah, those are some of the things to think about.
Yeah, that's great. And like when I think of all my favorite characters, you can tell that their background and personality and all those things have been built in. So if we think of someone like Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, she has a very not likable, but very distinct personality and is relatable because of the things that she suffered in her past. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually just watched that on TV the other day.
Oh, cool.
I binged all three. It was great. I haven't seen them in forever, but yeah, it was a great series to watch again.
Yeah, definitely. The next question was going to be about cliches, but we've kind of touched on that when we talked about, expressing emotion in lots of different ways and not just relying on the visceral things that can be quite limited, or gestures that we've all seen before. So I'm going to change it slightly and say, how can writers describe emotion? Because we talked a lot about drama. You mentioned melodrama earlier. How can we describe emotion without resorting to melodrama?
I think like this can be challenging depending on the type of situation that we're in. But I think we have to be careful, especially when your character experiences an emotion over a longer period of time. So it's not just a flash in the pan, it's something that's gradually building up. If it's an extended emotion that's, like I said, the character running from the axe murder in the woods kind of thing. Okay, so she finds a cabin and she hides and she's still scared, obviously, and she can hear him outside and stuff like that. So that would be something where you have this whole scene and your character is, they're going to be in that elevated emotional state for an extended period of time. I think the one thing we want to remember with emotions, and especially high emotions, is self-awareness. Our characters are not thinking about their emotions if there's a lot of things going on in the scene, if there's a lot of action, or, they're going to be focused on what's happening. So that case, our character is going to be there, huddled in this ramshackle hunter's cabin, and they're going to be listening for every single squeak and every single stick breaking outside, and they're going to be paying attention to the door. And so they're going to be very tuned into like sensory information in their environment and things like that. And so that's where we can create that feeling of that emotion without being direct about it, without showing them shaking and the trembling and them trying to hold a hand over their mouth and not cry or make noise. They're going to be doing those things, but if we sort of focus our attention outward on what they are noticing, what they are interacting with, what is the stimulus that's coming in on the scene, this is how we kind of disperse and still reinforce that emotion so that, the intensity of that scene is still there, but it's not all focused on, what is the character thinking and what is their body doing and things like that. So really just try to place yourself in the character and in that moment and think about, if you were in that situation, if Shane's huddling in the hunter's cabin and the big bad axe killer's, outside, like, what are you going to be focused on? Are you going to be aware of certain things that, like, there's a splinter like digging into your knee from the floorboard that you're kneeling on? Probably not. Right? Like, probably those things are just not even going to be, you're not going to be thinking about your personal discomfort. You're just going to be thinking about survival. So really be careful about getting too minute into the details, and pick things that make sense for the scene. So that's one piece of advice I would give. I think the other thing that we can do to help with melodrama is to recognize that emotions always have friends. They never show up alone. And so there's going to be a natural escalation or de-escalation to emotion. So maybe, you're walking along that path and you notice that there's somebody behind you. And so, okay, whatever. And then you notice that he's like getting a little closer, and then you can't see him anymore. And when you walk, you hear steps, and then when you stop, you don't. And now you're starting to get a little freaked out. So this is a gradual thing where you're going from you're fine to then you're not fine. You're a little apprehensive to suddenly, okay, I think there's something wrong. I'm going to speed up now. I find the cabin, you're scared, then you're terrorized when he's like actually axing down the door. So think about how emotions are going to shift and change. And your character may feel even conflicting emotions at a certain point in time. You can have a character that goes and buys like the coolest, shiniest, most awesome red sports car, and they're driving it off the lot, and they're like turning up the radio, and they're just like, they're thinking about how they're going to show off like to all their friends this cool car. And then all of a sudden someone cuts them off and they slam on the brakes, and their heart is like bursting out of their chest, and they're thinking about what a close call that was. And then all of a sudden it hits them like, oh my God, if I got into an accident, like, I can't afford it. What am I going to do? Like, did I overextend myself? Should I have not bought this car? Like, that's kind of us in a nutshell, is that our brains are, so we have to be careful when we're writing, because we need to convey this in a way that's logical, with emotion to readers. Otherwise, they're going to be like, what are they feeling now? I don't understand. So we want to progress in a very natural way and think about where emotion goes, if it's escalating or de-escalating.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we don't want to kind of, I get what you say. Like if a sudden thing happens, then yeah, of course we're going to be like, oh, that's just happened. It's really sudden. My emotions are all over the place. But if it's a more subtle shift in emotion, I guess we want to build up to it and then climb down from it again, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think a really good scene, I wish I had it on me, I could read it out right now, but what comes to mind, because we were talking about the Hunger Games, is in the book when Katniss is up in the tree and the careers are down below, and she first realizes that Peeta is with them. So at first she's relieved he's safe, he's not hurt, but then she overhears the conversation and realizes that he's helping them find her, or so she thinks. And so just her thought process from, oh, it's Peeta, and then, oh my God, like he's betraying me. And, like, it's just like, it's using her thoughts to show the shifts in emotions is brilliant. And that's one of the great things that we can use thoughts for, is to supply that context that is really needed to show that shift of opposite emotions, or how someone is really getting activated.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned that emotions always come with friends. So if you had to choose 3 of your favorite emotions from the Emotion Thesaurus, which ones would you choose and why?
I would choose hope, because I think every story needs hope. Every story should have hope. No matter how bad things get, your characters, they need to find that point of light in the distance. They need to find that optimism, that belief that things will get better, that trust that things will get better. So I would say that is an iconic one that I think we always need. The second favorite would be the opposite, which is fear. Because fear and hope, like, that's essentially the battle of your character. They're scared of stuff, but they want stuff, but they're scared. And how are they going to get it? And so these two kind of like battle each other. I think fear is another really important one. And then like a personal, just fun one, because there's no word for it in the English language, which is just fascinating. And it's kind of an emotion that we all feel, but it's a little bit darker, would be Schadenfreude.
I love this one.
Right? Yeah, like, that's the joy that you get from watching other people's misfortunes, which sounds terrible, but honestly, bad people, when bad things happen to them, like, you feel kind of good.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, yeah. So I like that one. Yeah, that's definitely, and I think too, that's a relatable emotion. It's a darker emotion, but when a character feels it, even if they feel guilty about feeling it, it's something that readers relate to, because we've all felt it. We've all been kind of like, a little happy when something bad happens to someone, or they get what's coming to them, or they criticized, you for something, and then they go and do something stupid, and it feels good.
Yeah, definitely. And the dark emotions are the fun ones to write, I think.
Yes, they are.
Yeah,
they really
definitely. Definitely. Okay, so this is the Write Better Fiction podcast. I usually ask people why they write fiction, but the amount of resources that you produce for writers has prompted me to ask a slightly different question. So, Angela Ackerman, what do you love most about helping authors write fiction?
I love that we all share a dream of connecting with other people, and being a link in that chain is awesome. Like, it's just so awesome. We have these incredible internal worlds inside of us, all of us, unique, different, amazing. And so helping people get that onto the page so that other people can read those stories and relate to those characters and feel seen, heard, less alone, because they identify with those characters. I mean, I can't think of a better thing to do. That's pretty amazing to be able to do that. And personally, I mean, I just love to help, because I feel like one of the most generous communities out there is the writing community. You know, writers have been so good to Becca and I. They've been so great supporting us, and we absolutely love to be able to do something in return and support them in writing stronger stories. It's just an awesome feeling to be able to do that.
Great. And that's a great way to end. So if you could tell everyone where they can find out more about you and everything you do.
I am all over social media. So you can honestly Google me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you'll find me. Well, yeah. But you can also find me at writershelpingwriters.net. I was thinking, can you Google Instagram? Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
You can find me at writershelpingwriters.net, which is our blog. Beck and I have been, blogging now for, like 15 years or more. I feel really old saying that, but it's true. And then One Stop for Writers is the site where our thesaurus database lives, and then all the different tools that we create for writers. So you can find us there too.
Awesome. That's perfect. Have you got anything you want to plug before we go as well?
I'm not a plugging sort, but I would suggest, like, if you need any help at all, definitely check out Writers Helping Writers. Like I said, we have so many articles, and we have resident writing coaches that come in and lend their voices, their ideas. So there's really a lot of knowledge there. And if you feel like you do need more help, then definitely check out the free trial at One Stop for Writers and give some of those tools a try, especially if you're struggling with show don't tell or character building, or you're struggling with understanding how to write a novel, because there's like a lot of moving pieces. And we've built a storyteller's roadmap there that leads you through planning, writing, revising, because we know it's tough, and sometimes having a map makes it a little easier.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Angela. I had a blast. That was great.
Well, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview with Angela and picked up a ton of actionable tips about writing realistic emotion. Join me next week when I'll be talking to book formatter, author, and podcaster Julia Scott all about how to format books. Have a great writing week. Thanks for listening to the Write Better Fiction podcast. Remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcatcher and leave a review, and we'll chat again next time.